So welcome back to another edition of the Heart to Heart podcast. And my guest today is Rav Arora. So Rav's been on the podcast before. He's an independent journalist. He's got a great Substack that I think you should definitely subscribe to. And I'm really happy to chat with him today. So Rav, welcome back to the show, brother.
Hey, Mike. It's good to be here. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year, man. So you had quite the end to your year. You're in the States, kind of on a little bit of a tour. You're on Adam Corolla, who is actually podcasting before Joe Rogan, if you can believe it or not. I think he was the first one. And you're on with Drew Pinsky. You're on with Tim Pool. So how did that all go?
Yeah, it was great. It was a great experience. Just meeting people, doing shows in studio was pretty nice, opposed to just virtual podcasts that I've done up until this point, and including right now. but it was good to see some faces, meet some people, do a few handshakes and, do stuff in person for once, which I feel like now in the pandemic, we've reached a point where we should be opening things up, but it's still very restrictive. So it was good to get some in-person social interactions, like right before the vaccine mandates kicked in. I was able to go, and now I'm locked basically indefinitely, if not permanently. I don't know what they're going to do. Hopefully indefinitely for maybe a few more months, but no idea when they're going to kick back the mandates.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm just being like hopelessly optimistic here, but I'm just hoping that like this mass infection that's going on is gonna spark some natural immunity in the population, and hopefully that's gonna get the numbers down and get us back to normal. But really hard to say at this point. But yeah, I mean I feel the same way, and I'm in the same boat. Like last year was the first calendar year that I've never left Canada like since I was like a child, so it's definitely something that's weighing in on me now, where I definitely want to get out of here and go for a trip. And I think there's a lot of people who are in that boat, and unfortunately because of these very, very restrictive mandates and restrictions, like we're just not able to live our life as we hope to or expect it to.
Yeah. And in my case, like this is directly tied to my career, is like going to the States and doing shows. Like I was going to get invited to do Ben Shapiro's show at some point, probably in December or January, to do a Sunday special in Florida, but I can't go anymore, and I was
Yeah.
going to probably, and I was talking to Joe Rogan's team, and his producer was interested, and we were having a conversation about having me on at some point soon, but that seems to be impossible now. And I know you're in the same boat with Rogan too. He's mentioning you, and any kind of possibility of going to the States and doing those shows is now hampered because of the travel mandates.
Yeah, I mean, he hasn't, asked me to come back on, but I imagine at some point, he would, but I don't know
Yeah.
what I'd be able to do now if he asked me. It seems like I basically have to say no, which is insane, but that's the position that we're in right now. But I do want to chat, a little bit more about COVID today. But you did write a really good piece recently, not to change gears too much, with Sam Harris. So Sam Harris is someone that I follow as well. I have his book Waking Up. I got it a few years ago. I haven't gotten into his app too much, just because I've used the Headspace app for a while, and I find that to be pretty effective. And I just figured, why kind of change if it's more or less working, but maybe I should. But anyways, how did you connect with Sam Harris?
Yeah, I emailed him a couple of times before, and including when I was in LA, I emailed him because I wanted to meet up and just talk to him because I've been so inspired by his work. But then he emailed me in December after seeing me on Glenn Lowry's podcast. Glenn Lowry, the economics professor at Brown University, he hosts the popular podcast on YouTube, the Glenn Show, where they're talking about racial issues, and he's really one of the best in the game right now in that specific topic. And so Sam's a subscriber to his Substack, Glenn's Substack, where he does his podcast. And so he saw me there. And so then he reached out and said that he's happy to talk to me. And so we ended up having a great 1 hour conversation on Christmas Eve. And
Awesome.
we just, yeah, it was great. I didn't expect it to be what it was. Like I just started started talking about meditation, and I just started sharing like some of my struggles and issues and things that I'm going through right now. And he offered a lot of insights about like being in the present moment and not drifting away too far into the past or the future, and being content with what you have. Like really, really powerful stuff. And I documented some of our conversation in the Substack article.
Yeah, so I mean, I know you probably would get a lot out of just reading the article, but if you can share some of like, I guess your most profound insights or things that you kind of learned from that conversation, what would they be?
Yeah. Yeah. One thing he was saying was that um, that so much of our thoughts about the future are totally unnecessary, which
Yeah,
is a very counterintuitive idea, especially for me as somebody who's very ambitious and forward thinking and very creative and very goal oriented. Like I'm always like setting goals and visualizing and also just like fantasizing about things I want to do in the future. And
me too.
Sam's point was is like beyond just like putting things on the calendar and sort of planning ahead a bit, all of this like delusional like fantasy thinking or just like overthinking about the future doesn't actually accomplish anything. It just robs us of actually enjoying the present moment. And and he says also like if you're like fantasizing about the future too much, which is sort of a theme in my life, is like always thinking about things I want to do in the future. He says like many of the times like it what we think about the future doesn't actually happen, or if it does happen, it does not give you the lasting fulfillment that you think it does. Like that's an illusion. Like it's an illusion to think that once I publish my book, or once I go on Joe Rogan's show, or once I do this, or once I move out to LA, or I get a girlfriend, that I'll be like happy. Like that's an illusion, because once you get that thing, then you're on to the next thing. Then it's just you're
Yeah.
on this like treadmill constantly, and up until your deathbed, where you're just like wanting, 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 and never actually enjoying the success and the good fortune and the joy that's come your way in the present moment. So that's a really powerful insight, is to not get lost too much in the future and enjoy what's in front of you right now.
Yeah, they're. Are you familiar with Naval Ravikant?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay, yeah. So he has a line. I hope I don't butcher it, but it's something like desire is a contract to be unhappy until you get what you achieve, or whatever is something like that. But basically, what he's saying is, I think a lot what Sam and what you were kind of saying is that like if you say like I'll be happy when, then like you're basically saying to yourself then you're not going to be happy until that time happens, which is terrible, right? And then like you just said too, like once you achieve one goal, then you'll start off again and say I'll be happy when again when you achieve this next goal. So it's like you have to sort of like try to enjoy the present moment, like Sam and you were saying. And it reminds me of a couple different things too. So Seneca has this line where he says we often suffer more in imagination than in reality. And that's something that I think that a lot of us are guilty of, myself as well, for sure. Thinking about the future, thinking that once you achieve certain goals that you're going to be so much more happier. But it's really as you said, like a lie or something that we tell ourselves. And the only way to really actually be happy is to be able to enjoy the present moment. And that's it sounds kind of corny in some ways, but it's absolutely 100% true. And going back to Naval's line, like I really do feel like that's what a lot of people are doing. They're making contracts with themselves to be unhappy until they get what they are trying to achieve. And then once they get there, maybe they'll be happy in that moment once they achieve it, but then immediately they start shifting their goals. And again they'll have something else that'll come up that say that I'll be happy when this happens, and Y happens, instead of before when you were saying I'll be happy when X happens. Then when X happens, you just automatically switched over to Y. And I think that's something that a lot of us unfortunately struggle with. And I know you're a big fan of Jordan Peterson, like I am. And he does say sacrifice now for later a lot. And I certainly understand that, and I think that's a good thing to do. But at the same time, like you can't be sacrificing your happiness constantly for later. Because if you've sacrificed your happiness constantly for later, then your whole life is just going to be basically one big sacrifice instead of enjoying yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of important insights from the East that we need to sort of bring in into our sort of Western mind of like always working tirelessly to achieve things and always sacrificing things for the future. Like I always see sort of the Peterson ideas and the Sam ideas to be sort of like the yin and the yang. Like they balance each other out. Like you have to work hard, personal responsibility, discipline, work ethic, um, setting out goals for yourself and planning, like Peterson's future authoring program, which is great. Like setting goals for yourself of what you want to do. And I've been thinking a lot about that the last few days of things I want to do in the new year, like what my intentions are. What one intention that I have is that to have faith in the unknown and not just like feverishly worry too much about the future outcomes, because that's something that always tends to rob me of the contentment in the present moment. And
Yeah,
that's
Robert Greene talks about that too, like
right.
uncertainty being, the biggest kind of disease of the mind.
Yeah, yeah. So Sam's stuff is really, I think, important there. Like he talks about this paradox of like actually trying to make the next moment better. Setting goals, correcting course, changing things in your life that have to be changed, but also recognizing that the way things are right now is just the way they're supposed to be. And they can only be this way right in this moment. So being happy right now with what you have, but also striving to improve later. That's very important, opposed to just striving to change the next moment without actually appreciating what you have right now. It's really powerful.
Yeah, like I think that obviously you need to prepare for your future and that type of thing, but it doesn't mean that when you are preparing for your future that you can't live in the present moment. And I think that's the part that trips a lot of people up is they think that if they are preparing for their future or even just preparing for tomorrow, that they're not able to live in the present moment. But you can enjoy that preparation that you're doing in the present moment, and then that can lead to you to happiness, where you're not just expecting something to change all the time. And really, you're happiest when you don't want anything to be different. That's when you're really at your happiest. And I think that that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and they don't necessarily get to that state very often. But essentially, when you don't want anything to be different, when you're just completely content, that's when you're actually at your happiest.
Mm. Yeah, and that's why Sam recommended to me to do a long-term meditation retreat. He said that would be a good idea for me to do for people who can afford that kind of thing. That's definitely something I've thought about before, like a 5 or 7 day meditation retreat where
Okay.
you're in silence and you're gone, your phone's off, no social media, no nothing. You're meditating 5, 10, 12 hours a day, depending on which program you're in. And you're just off for a week, and all you're doing is just being mindful. Usually some of these meditation retreats are up in the mountains or in the forest or someplace beautiful. So you connect with nature, you sort of let go of all your anxiety and all your anticipations for the future, and you're just being trained to just pay attention to the breath, or do meditation walking in the forest where you're just paying attention to the trees or to sensations in the body, just for 1 week, like a total mental detox. Because that's what Sam did for 10 years. But obviously, you can do that in 1 week chunks here in the West and Canada. There's many places you can do that. So once, hopefully, COVID restrictions, if they lift, then some of those meditation retreats are going to be open for people to go do a bit of a mental detox.
Yeah, I'd love to do something like that. I guess I did something kind of similar to that in 2014. I did the 40 years of Zen at the Biosabanan Institute in BC, and that was pretty amazing experience. But there were still some breaks where like we could use our phone kind of thing. So we weren't allowed to use our phone during the daytime, but once we left the facility to go home at night, we were able to get on our phones and log on or whatever. But I think that we don't, I think, realize, myself included, that like how much we just are connected to our phones and to the internet, to our computer. You know, and to be able to just go away for, you know, 5 to 7 days and not touch anything. Like, I mean, when you said that, I was like, holy shit, like, I don't even know if I'd be able to do that. Like, would I go insane? But, you know, I think it would definitely be, you know, very good for me, because I mean, I, you know, can't remember the last time I've gone, you know, a full day without, you know, using my phone, you know,
Mhm.
and most of those days, it's usually, you know, every couple hours or so. You know,
Yeah.
it's, you know, pretty infrequent that I'll even go, you know, 3 or 4 hours without, you know, someone texting me or calling me or checking something on the internet, you know, checking social media, like whatever it is.
Mm.
And the thing is too, is that like, you know, when I anyway have some fear of like, okay, if I'm not like on top of, you know, everything that's going on with COVID, if I'm not on top of everything that's going on with psychedelics or whatever it is that I'm studying or interested in at that time, that like I have this fear of like, oh my God, if I don't do this, like I'm going to be way behind. I'm not going to
Mm.
be part of the conversation anymore, which is really, again, just like a silly thought, you know. And I imagine, you know, I would be in that sense, you know, suffering more in imagination than in reality, because I think that if I did do something like that, like a 5 to 7 day meditation with no phone, you'd probably come back and think that like, oh, if I don't miss anything for a few days, again, everything's going to be fine. Because if you did miss something for 5 to 7 days, you know, it's very, very unlikely that like, you know, your life is going to like unravel, or that you're not going to be,
Mm.
you know, feel like you're a part of the conversation anymore. Right. So, I that's something that I'm glad you mentioned, because I think that I would actually benefit from that quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah. And Sam told me that on meditation retreats, you can disabuse, use the term disabuse yourself from the idea of boredom, or the idea of just discontentment. So like when you're on the retreat, like that's the most like stripped down version of life you can be, and it's the most minimalistic way of living, because all you're doing is meditating. So if you can learn to master that, if you can learn to just be content with just breathing all day and just feeling your body and feeling your breath, if you can do that, then all this other suffering throughout your day about things about the future, different stresses in life, can seem really easy. Like that's a rudimentary step that you can take to actually master your mind, which I think is very powerful.
Yeah, and I think too that like there's a big difference between like, you know, suffering sort of like necessarily, where and suffering, you know, unnecessarily, right? So
Yeah.
like, you know, when a woman has to give birth to a child, like obviously, you know, it's very painful. There's a lot of suffering going on then, but you know, it's something that has to be done. You can't really do anything, you know, about that. I mean, you can get an epidural and all that kind of stuff, but you know, it's still going to be a very painful process. Whereas like, you know, a lot of us are suffering sort of like unnecessarily. I think about, you know, worrying about the future, worrying about, you know, even what tomorrow is going to bring. And it seems like, you know, what Sam's doing in his with his books and with his apps, and you know, the conversation that you guys had on your Substack, you know, it seems like it's just teaching us that, you know, we don't need to suffer unnecessarily, and that we need to bring it to our attention and to our awareness when we are suffering unnecessarily. And then once you are aware of it, then you can potentially do something about it. But I think that a lot of people are so unaware, that they're not even able to kind of get themselves out of that rut, because they're unaware that they're kind of suffering unnecessarily.
Yeah, yeah, it's really sad, like how the institutions have sort of colluded together, and we have these very established ideas of how to approach mental health in our society. Like, like nobody's being taught how to meditate. You know, psychedelic therapies are, you know, mostly illegal. Like, it's very difficult to find those resources. Very difficult to learn about meditation, although that is increasing more and more. But I feel like since like elementary school, like there should be mandatory meditation, like
I agree.
mandatory PE to exercise your body. Same thing. You got to exercise your mind. You got to learn how your mind works. Otherwise, suicidal tendencies, bullying, racism, exclusion, and all sorts of things people go throughout teenagehood, and things that happen in the school that are a result of people being hostage to their own emotions. Like this should be taught very early on, and it's not. And so people just grow up and they're, like you said, they're very unaware, and they don't even know. Like you talk to people like, oh, there's this meditation thing. It doesn't even like register with them that you can actually like tune into your thoughts and actually yeah, invert the system and actually have more control over your thoughts rather than your thoughts controlling and governing your whole being. Like there's actually a way where you can be mindful of what appears in consciousness, and you can choose whether or not you want to identify with this thought. And I've by no means reached that state yet, but I've caught, glimpses of it at this point, which are very, very profound through our meditation practice, through MDMA, psilocybin, microdoses, stuff like that. But it's all very, very important, and that's what I'm sort of documenting in the Substack, is this new spiritual kind of journey that I'm on, where I feel like, up until this point, I've just been conditioned with these ideas of how to live, and I've just been needlessly suffering and chasing after all these things. And I feel like now, at 20 years old, I can like take my destiny in my hands and sort of, go on this journey where I can sort of break free from the shackles of my own obsessive mind.
Yeah, and I like what you said there too, because there's, most people understand that, if you want to, build, a good healthy body, like you're going to have to work out, you're going to have to eat well, lift weights, run, bike, whatever it is. But if you want to build a healthy mind, like people just think that like, oh, it's going to like automatically happen. Like it's just automatically going to be, happy, or automatically gonna not be anxious. And it's like, that's just not the way it works. Like you have to put in just as much effort into your mental health as you do to your physical health. Like no one expects to, wake up in the morning if they've never, and in peak physical condition, if they've never worked out before. But for some reason, people think that, you don't need to do all these, meditation exercises and to, learn about mindfulness and self-awareness in order to be healthy mentally. And I think that's, a very important message. And like you said, like all those things that you're talking about, particularly the meditation, like those things should be taught in school. And I can only imagine how much, we'd be able to reduce anxiety and reduce depression and traumatic experiences if we did teach those tools to kids in school.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge advocate of that, and it's just yeah, it's sad that people aren't aware of these things, and it's something that I'm learning more and more as time goes on about these powerful techniques, and also incorporating that with explorations with psychedelics and sort of merging those two fields together.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because you're writing. I know you've shifted some focus in your writing towards psychedelics now. So why did you do that, Rav, and what kind of benefits have you, if you're okay with sharing, personally from any psychedelic use that you may have had?
Yeah, so I started writing about. Well, I should go back a little bit. I started taking interest in psychedelics after a series of events in my life that caused a lot of pain and suffering and trauma, heartbreak, friendships, loneliness, isolation, political alienation. Like a lot of things went wrong over the past couple of years that just really put me in the state of just soaking in my own misery. And so, and I've been meditating pretty frequently at that point, but I felt like now's time for a more dramatic change. And so I started looking more into what other things I can do. And it seemed like psychedelics were the most powerful, safe, effective, and tested tools that I could use. And so I started looking to psilocybin and ketamine and MDMA. And so far at this point, I've only done one ketamine experience I had, which wasn't super significant. I'm going to do it again actually this weekend, most likely, but it's microdosing psilocybin. And then I had one MDMA session, which was like, could never have anticipated it. It was one of the most like beautiful experiences I've ever had doing it. This was early December, and I'm still in the process of writing about it. So I won't give you like the full I'm still like planning out what exactly I want to say, because a lot of personal things came up during it with respect to parents and family and stuff like that. But basically, what the MDMA experience taught me was like there is a way of being that is very different from uh, what I'm currently in the process of doing right now. Like there is, it is possible to not just be needlessly suffering and chasing after the next thing and always being anxious. Like I remember that experience of just being so content and blissful for no reason. And um, and so I remember like asking my guide, like, can I be more like this in my day-to-day living? And he was like, obviously you can't be high on MDMA every day, but you can be more and more joyful, more and more blissful, more and more loving towards other people. And that was just really powerful for me to hear, because up until that point, I'd just been really miserable and anxious and kind of depressed with how things were going. So that like showed me like there is a way, there is this like portal of happiness in your mind that you can access. And Sam talks about this a lot through MDMA. Like you can access that. Like MDMA can teach you that it's there, this like this joy that you can experience for no reason. But then you can more and more with those MDMA experiences, you can incorporate that in your life and actually experience those same things through meditation and through just being in gratitude for all the things that are around you.
Yeah, that's it's very similar actually to a podcast that I did a month or two ago with Nicole Hodges, where we were talking about psychedelics and how sometimes they can just remind you of what like happiness is, and they can teach you that like happiness is possible. And like you said, like of course you can't be on MDMA every day, but if you get that experience and you get that feeling, that it's possible. And with the right integration techniques, particularly through meditation, you can teach yourself to get in maybe not the exact same state, but very very similar states all the time in your life. And and the thing is that it does require a lot of work in order to do that. So just like we were talking about before, like it takes a lot of work to build a really good body, or to be in peak physical condition. It also takes a lot of work to be really mentally sound and to be mentally well. And I think that MDMA and these psychedelics are excellent tools for showing people that it is possible to be happy, it is possible to have blissful states. But at the same time, and I know Sam does a really good job of doing this, and a lot of people besides Sam say this as well, that like obviously you can't be on MDMA all the time, but you can in fact incorporate those experiences back into your real life. And that's why integration techniques are so important. And I said this, and Nicole agreed with me a couple whenever we did that podcast a month or two ago, that like the first few days after, and the first couple weeks after you have that experience, they're so important. Because if you have an MDMA or psilocybin session, whatever it is, and then the next day you just go back to your life, you're basically just going to be going back to the same life that you had before, but with the same thought patterns. And part of the reason, how psilocybin works is that it breaks up your default mode network. So we have this we all have, real strong connections into who we are and how we think. But with the help of psilocybin, you can break those connections up. But the thing is that if you break those connections and then all of a sudden you go back doing the same thing, those connections are all just going to reform again. And then you're going to say, oh, well, MDMA or psilocybin, the medicine doesn't work. And really that's not true. And that's not the case, because what would happen if you did it properly is you would break up, your default mode network with the psilocybin, and then you would, mindfully integrate meditation and some of these techniques back into your daily life that would allow you to at least catch glimpses or even more of the way that you are feeling when you're using psilocybin or using MDMA.
Mm. Yeah, and by integration we mean like meditation is one, but also journaling, reflecting, talking to a counselor. Is there anything else that I'm missing, or is that pretty much just it? Just counseling and
I,
meditation, right?
Yeah, counseling, meditation, and just like, I know this word gets overused so much, but just like mindfulness, like catching yourself and being aware. Like, if your connections are real strong, and and you have these negative things come up, you may not even notice that they're coming up. But
Mm,
if you're able to, be aware of it, then you can, mindfully say, okay, I'm kind of building or using an old connection that didn't serve me very well anymore. So now I need to, disconnect from that and think about, what it felt like when I was on MDMA or when I was meditating earlier, so I can get back into that particular state. And again, like, what we're saying is not easy. It's definitely not easy to do, but it definitely can be done, and people do it all the time. And I mean, Sam is a great example. Like you said, he spent 10 years of his life basically,
yeah.
meditating. And I'm sure that he's not, the exact, in the exact same state he is all the time, now that he was during that, decade of his life. But he certainly is experiencing glimpses of it every single day. And that mindfulness is helping him make, better decisions and just being a better person.
Yeah. Well, in his case, like it's, you don't want to over exaggerate, but you don't want to understate his state either. Like he says that he doesn't even, he's never, as far as he can recall, expressed any real vocal anger, he says, anymore. Like if anger comes up, he's able to just fight it off right away. Like he has a very strong mindfulness alarm is the term he uses. And so as soon as
Yeah.
he feels like, I'm just making a random example, but if his wife does something that ticks him off, like all of a sudden he's so mindful, he knows like, oh no, I shouldn't yell, I shouldn't, do this negative thing. I can take a step back, take a deep breath, and just approach the situation in a rational, calm way. And he says like, this is a superpower, like, and it really is. Like, imagine if you could do that. If you could just like even just like I think about it this way, like if you could press a button, like if you're like incessantly thinking about something, which I frequently do, about the past or future, something that's really frustrating me. I imagine like if I can like press a button and just like shut that monkey mind from jumping in your head so much, like that would be amazing. And that's like kind of the state you get to with meditation with years and years of practice, which again, I haven't experienced that yet, but I have faith that that is something you can do based on so many people I know who are just living very joyful and content and mindful lives. Like you can see it, how it's changed people's lives, and I think psychedelics are important for people who have experienced a lot of trauma, where meditation isn't just enough. They need like if they're stuck in the situation and they've tried meditation for years. Like I know certain people like that as well, who have been meditating for years, but they're still really depressed because of this thing that's happened to them a few years ago. So they need that psychedelic kind of reawakening, which then deepens their meditation practice, opposed to just meditating and just being stuck for years and living in this kind of miserable rut.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up that example about Sam, because there's probably lots of people listening to this that, when they are triggered by something, they're very quick to anger, and that's a neural connection that they've built. But what you can do, and again, the psilocybin is really good for breaking up your default mode network. But even when you're not taking it, what you want to do is you want to build new neural connections. So the next time someone triggers you and you become aware of it, and then you diffuse the situation and you don't get angry, then the next time that someone triggers you, you can fall back on that experience as well. So just like you can, fall back on the experience of what you're of what went on when you use MDMA or psilocybin, you can also fall back on experiences where you were able to be mindful when you were completely sober. And it seems like that's what Sam has done. Certainly, I'm sure the MDMA has taught him a lot of things about different states of consciousness, and about not being quick to anger. But I also believe that the thing that's really made his life different in the long term is that all these times when someone may have triggered him in the past, now he's able to reflect on those sober moments and incorporate those into his life as well. So that's part of what I mean by integration techniques.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting.
Um, But I know that we only have about 20 minutes or so left, and we kind of spent a lot of time on Sam Harrison meditation, which is good. I wanted to today, but
Good, good.
I know that there's a lot of new restrictions and lockdowns that have been going on since we chatted last. Even though I think we only did our pod a month or two ago, but in these days, that's like a decade, in terms of
Yeah.
what's transformed and happened. And I think it was only this week in Quebec, the past few days or so, I'm not sure the exact date, that now they've implemented some new restrictions, and I believe that you have to have your booster now to be fully vaccinated in Quebec. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's going to be used for the vaccine passport system. Is you got to have the 3 shots. I can't remember if that's going to be mandatory to get into places. I'm pretty sure that's where they're headed towards. Is to like go to the gym or go to restaurants. You need your 3 shots.
And I mean, I think it's Australia right now. If you're unvaccinated, they're saying that work is not an essential reason to leave your home. Exercise is not an essential reason to leave your home, which is fucking crazy. I mean, work is so important. Exercise is incredibly important. I mean, I kind of put my life into three buckets. I kind of think of, I have my work, I have my health, and I have my relationships. And those are, three things that I want to improve on or get better with every day, or close to every day anyways. And for those people, they've had their work taken away, now they've had their exercise taken away. And I mean, obviously relationships is going to fall in there too, because they're not able to see people. And sure, doing things virtually is great like we're doing now, but it's just not the same thing as having that human connection in person. So my fear is that some of these restrictions that have been imposed in Australia are going to happen in Canada. And people will say, oh, that would never happen in Canada, but I bet the people in Australia said that this would never happen in Australia. So I really think that we need to be less compliant overall with what the government is telling us. So we need to kind of stand up for our rights and freedoms a lot more, because if we don't, I mean, how much worse is this going to get? Because it's already pretty bad here in Canada.
Yeah. And I just double checked real quickly. It's a bit vague right now what it says for Quebec, but it says that you eventually will need 3 shots in order to use your vaccine passport. So it's definitely coming down the road. You'll need 3 shots to go to the gym, to the restaurant. Right now, it just says it's going to be restricted to liquor and cannabis stores. You'll need a booster shot to go there, which is kind of strange why they would start at that, but that's where it is.
Yeah, that's definitely a pretty odd place to start. And in Ontario now, I mean, we're in another
Yeah.
lockdown, right? So we're not basically supposed to, leave our house unless it's for an essential reason, more or less. And I gotta say, I thought that once we got to 80% or even 70% of being fully vaccinated, that we would be progressing to a point where we weren't going to be heading to a lockdown at least. But that hasn't happened. So this one has been a little bit surprising to me. And I'm not certainly not there yet, but I understand how people can feel a little bit hopeless at this point, because they're like, we've done everything that you guys have asked. We're up to close to 90% fully vaccinated Ontarians, for the ages above 12, I believe. And there's been lots of people who have natural immunity now as well, but I think there'll be even more after this wave of infections. And yet we're still back in lockdown, and even the schools are closed, which is so difficult on kids, and so difficult on parents, and so difficult on families. And people kind of act sometimes like the lockdown is just the best way in order to reduce infection, when in reality, like, there's pros and cons to lockdowns. And I think that most people now would say that the cons of the lockdown certainly outweigh the pros.
Yeah, at this point, it makes no sense to lock down. I mean, we got the vaccines, we got boosters for people who want them. it, like to restrict children's ability to go to school is just crazy to me. Like, we know, like, Fauci came out the other day and said something that so many people have been saying from the start. He's been saying a few things I don't have been following. A few things came out recently, which is like, we've been saying this for like 2 fucking years. Like, what the hell? Like, he was saying like, oh, like, actually, with kid hospitalizations with COVID, we shouldn't worry too much because many of the cases in some studies show up to like 40% of pediatric COVID hospitalizations are just incidental cases. So a kid comes in with a broken leg or a car accident or whatever, and then he's tested positive for COVID, and that's counted as a COVID pediatric hospitalization. And he said that, so we shouldn't be, fear mongering about kids. But it's like, we've been saying that for years, like for, year and a half now, and that's been considered a conspiracy. Yeah, we're still, shutting down schools here in BC. My brother and sister, I guess they're not complaining too much. They just get another week of Christmas vacation, so they're playing their video games and sleeping until 2 p.m. That's fine. But it's like, and then also, like, for college now, like, they've for me, for university, they've postponed it for a week, and then online till end of January. Although for me, it's not anything significant because my courses are independent studies. I'm studying Buddhism right now and Hinduism and learning like the history of meditation, and that's all independent studies that's online primarily. So that's fine for me, but for most people that's very difficult. And in the US now, they're mandating booster shots for college students, which is
I
so
heard that.
insane.
Yeah. At
Like not
Stanford and
not
Hopkins University too, like two of what are
yeah.
considered to be like, the best universities. You would think that, Stanford and John Hopkins universities would have, incredibly intelligent people that would, look at the science and make decisions based upon that. But they're not. They're basically just going along with this ridiculous narrative that, you need a booster shot even if you're 18 years old.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely insane. I don't know what the basis for that is. We have no safety, long-term efficacy data for what boosters do. Like, do they actually materially reduce your chance of getting, serious illness or infection? Like, no idea. Like, and so much of the data that we have right now coming from Denmark, we've seen some of the data where they've adjusted it by age, and they've adjusted it by vaccine status, and they're showing that people who are boosted and who are vaccinated in almost every age group are more likely to be infected with Omicron than people who are unvaccinated and have natural immunity. And so, same with Ontario, similar data there showing negative vaccine efficacy, which is so bizarre. So the idea that we would mandate this when we have higher infection rates per various multiple age groups among the vaccinated, it just makes it just the whole narrative just crumbles. And now Moderna CEO is talking about we may need a fourth shot now because of waning vaccine efficacy with the third shot. And it's just like, what are we doing? Like, this is not going to end ever. Like, it's just total absurdity.
Yeah, it just seems like it's just going to be shot after shot after shot. And it's the thing is like the question that I heard, Peter Attia say the other day is like, when does it end? Like when will it end? And like we really don't know that right now. Like it's basically just, keep getting shots, keep getting boosters until this thing goes away, which is, seems to be a pretty hopeless and unscientific strategy, from my point of view. I think that we need to have some type of, end game here, and we need to be looking at the science, a lot harder, and then making decisions based upon that. And it just seems like people are not doing that. They're just going straight for the booster, straight for the shots, and thinking that, that's going to be the way that we're going to get out of this. And I don't think we can, vaccinate and boost ourselves out of this pandemic. And the other ridiculous thing too is that, the vaccine has now been available for almost a year. I think it started rolling out in March or something like that, sometime last year in Ontario. Maybe it was a little bit sooner for healthcare workers and stuff. But so we've had this vaccine now for a full year, and yet we still don't have any early outpatient treatments, which is, ridiculous. And I think that needs to improve significantly. And I know that fluvoxamine's come up quite a bit recently, and a lot of people feel that that's something that could be effective overall. I heard Peter Attia talk about that with he actually did a really good podcast with VJ and Zed Dog. I don't know if you're familiar with those
Oh
guys.
yeah, Vinay Prashad and Dr. Zabian. Yeah. I'm in contact with both. Yeah, Vinay is great. Vinay Prashad, his Substack is excellent. He's been doing
Okay.
amazing work on this stuff, talking about myocarditis and side effects and natural immunity. And it's like scientists and epidemiologists like him are just being totally sidelined, and instead we're seeing all this fear mongering with so many like top doctors like Sanjay Gupta, Fauci, and so many other people who we are trusting with all this information. And like Sanjay Gupta is on Sesame Street telling kids to get vaccinated, like without saying anything about side effects. And we have more and more data coming out showing that what we thought of as the myocarditis risk, our previous assessment of it was actually an understatement. That the risk is actually higher than that.
Yeah.
There was a new preprint from Oxford researchers showing that for men under the ages of 40, post-vaccine myocarditis for Pfizer dose 2 and 3 and Moderna dose 1, 2, and 3 is higher than myocarditis from COVID. So myocarditis from those doses in men ages 16 to 39 is higher than from COVID. And so that's, again, Pfizer dose 2 and 3, Moderna, all doses, myocarditis rates are higher. That's in the data now. And it's
Yeah.
just like, nobody's talking about this.
And I think too that Moderna is supposed to be the worst one for
Yeah.
it. I heard VJ and Peter talk about that. I think they estimated that would be maybe 3 to 5 times higher for Moderna versus Pfizer. So and that's something that I don't think a lot of people know about. So if someone had to be vaccinated, or if we were to vaccinate someone, a male under the age of 40, it'd probably be a good idea, not to get Moderna, and maybe, to get one of the other ones to at least, mitigate your risk. But, like you said, and again, I heard Peter talk with this, like, it's so difficult to quantify, like, the number of people who would get myocarditis from COVID, because they're looking at people who are like already hospitalized, right? So it's people who are like already hospitalized with COVID. But like, what about all those young people who got COVID in the community that were never ever hospitalized? Like, those people are not included in the data, right? So we're getting like a number that is artificial, and that's not accurate. So it's I'm happy that those studies are coming out, because there's definitely some type of risk with the myocarditis. Again, it is still fairly low, but the thing is that your risk of being hospitalized or having a complication from COVID when you're under the age of 40 is also very, very low. So you're kind of putting yourself in a position where if you don't get the vaccine, then at that point at least you're not exposing yourself to the risk of the vaccine itself. But if you get COVID, then yes, you may in fact be exposing yourself to a risk of myocarditis, but that's not definite. It's not definite that you're going to get COVID. And I think that that's something that we haven't really chatted about much about, certainly in the mainstream media.
Yeah. And I think that it has to be an individualized risk assessment. You can't just, throw these broad numbers out there. Like, for healthy people, healthy, fit men under the age of 40 who are supplementing with vitamin D, you bring in some of those variables, then it's like, as an individual, it makes so much more sense to just get COVID than to to opt for the vaccine. Like you could make an argument for that. You could also make the argument the other way around. But the point is, it's supposed to be an individual risk assessment rather than these broad generalizations, which when you talk about the broad aggregate numbers, it includes people who are very severely ill, comorbidities, who are obese, and like there's newer data also showing that we don't have, like, we're underreporting the myocarditis cases. There was a recent study. It was done by an insurance company. I can send you the link afterwards. I'm forgetting which company it was in the US, but they looked at myocarditis cases that may have been missed in the hospitals because there's like different codes you put in for myocarditis, but there could be like other codes where they don't explicitly say myocarditis, but it could be some heart elevation or heart inflammation. They may use some slightly different terminology, and these researchers, they put together all the data and found that there were a significant number of cases that weren't specifically coded with myocarditis, that were myocarditis from the vaccine. And so the risk they come up with is something around like 1 in 2,000, 1 in 3,000, which is similar to data from Hong Kong, and lower than some of the other estimates of 1 in 5,000 from vaccine-induced myocarditis in men after the second dose.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I got this correct, but I thought that VJ and Peter were saying that it was like 1 in 2,600 for men. I think for men between 16 to 24, but don't quote me on that. But I think it's somewhere around that number. So it's I mean it's definitely something that we need kind of better data on. And of course, when you have better data, then you can make better decisions. But on that note, Rav, the hour went by super fast, so we're already basically out of time.
I just got the study in front of me. I should just name it. Study from the Kaiser Permanente NW healthcare provider, showing 1 in 2,600 chance of developing myocarditis from males 12 to 17. And then 1 in 1,800 for males 18 to 62, actually. So higher for males 18 to 62 after dose 2 of Moderna. So
okay.
Very interesting. So higher among males that are a bit older. So yeah.
And is that dose, is that just Moderna in that study?
It doesn't say here specifically. Okay. It just says dose. I'm looking at the graph. It just says second dose, first dose. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, anyways, I guess once we have more data, we'll be able to make better decisions. But right now, I guess we'll just have to make the decisions we can with the data that we have. But Rav, thanks so much.
Sorry, again. This is with mRNA vaccination.
Okay, so mRNA in general.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Rav, thanks for sharing that last piece of information. Super appreciate it. And just let everyone know where they can follow you online, how they can subscribe to your Substack, and where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can follow me, Rav Arora 1 on Twitter, and then the Substack is ravarora.substack.com.
Awesome. Okay, brother. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I'm sure we'll do round 3 sometime later on this year.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for coming on, man. Super appreciate your a wealth of knowledge as always, and really appreciate your insights and sharing everything from your conversation with Sam Harris. I'm sure that's gonna help out a lot of people. So thanks so much for doing that.
Yeah, of course, man. Appreciate it.
Okay, brother. We'll chat again soon.